I've got a great tutorial video for you planned today. It's minis. We have mini M&Ms or M&M minis, little tiny itty bitty M&Ms, and we have little itty bitty Reese's. Well, why not have itty bitty little art? Okay? With these minis, a lot of artists, and you'll see them, we have a lot of artists that do minis. And matter of fact, I'm going to do a live broadcast with doing minis eventually. Just like thumbnail sketches, minis are a great way to work out some of the issues and the color combinations that you might want to use on a bigger piece. A lot of times I will enter the studio and you can see right behind me there a couple minis. I usually do them 6x6, 8x8, and occasionally I will call a 10x10 a mini, but typically 6x6, 6x9. I like square format, so if you're not into square format, then 6x9, 5x7, those sort of minis are a great way not to do a lot of detail, but to work out composition, work out broad areas, and I'm going to demonstrate that today. As a lot of my previous subscribers know, I live in a very flat area of the country, so I have to try to find things that have long horizons, big skies, big foregrounds. And in the spring we had a lot of tillage in the fields, and I remember as a kid these plowed fields, and I did some drawings, and this is the one I'm going to paint from today. I paint from drawings, not photographs. Feel free to apply the same things to your photographs, but I've already worked out some of the compositional elements of moving the eye this way and then across this way and up and through. So I have to do that with flat areas. So I'm going to take this mini thumbnail, and you see why we call them thumbnails. I'm going to take this mini thumbnail and I'm going to turn it into a 6x6 or 8x8 and work out one of the compositions. Typically I'll do 1 to 2 of the color studies in these minis, and then I'll stick them on my wall like you saw earlier, and I call that the fermentation wall. And after I decide which of these minis that I did this week do I want to use. Now you can see they're in a notebook, and I usually will do 3 to 6 mini thumbnail sketches before I get to the one that I like the composition in and like the elements to try to transfer to a color study. Sometimes I paint a big piece directly from these thumbnails, but not today. We're going to show you the mini process. If you've never done a mini before, I suggest you use just a regular piece of drawing paper with some tooth, but I have these old 5x7 pastels that I put under the sink and just run my hand across and washed off the surface. So I'm going to pick one of these. The stains, the reason I say you guys maybe want to use, if you've not done these, just a plain piece of paper, but these stains won't bother me. I'll tape this off into a square format. So I'm going to do a square from these and just tape off the portion I'm not going to use. Okay, I mounted this up here. As you can see, as I said, I cut this off because I want to be the square format, and this was a 5x7. So 5x5 is usually a little smaller than I go, but this is what I had available. And because of the simplicity of this drawing, I actually selected, since it's got stains on it, I selected one where this might become the sky, and this is the area in the distance. There will be a tree line in here, and that will be light, and the dark stains here will translate into some of those shadows that you saw in. I'll try to pop that into here so you can compare it to the drawing, but these dark areas here will be some of those furrows I can translate. So for me, it's not distracting. For you guys, starting with a blank paper, if you haven't done it, is probably best. Now you're going to see this is real time. I probably will only edit out a few seconds of dead space, or when I make some stupid comment that I have to restate. But basically what you're seeing is in real time. So the study, the drawing, only took me probably a minute or less to get on the page. And I did, like I said, 5 or 6 of those things and picked the best one that we're drawing from today. So that drawing is quick, and this we're just trying to work on the color scheme or color palette that I've selected. I think I want to do this in red violets and create kind of an earthy feel with those red violets, and then have a little green in the trees, and the sky will have, since I'm using red violet, the sky will have the yellows in it. So that's the plan, and now I'm going to get started, and you'll see in real time how I work through these. And like I said, I'll only do 1 or 2 color studies. If I decide I don't like the red violet that I started with, I'll try it in a different set of analogous colors or split complements or something from my color wheel. Now this is a blue, and because I am trying to just block in large shapes and get the feel of some of those furrows, I remember as a kid that when I was really small, plowing was really fun in the spring because the big old steel plow wasn't that big. It was like what they call 3-bottom plows back then. It would go down the field and the dirt would go over these metal, shiny metal things and create little shiny spots looking off into the distance. So although this field was not really a traditionally plowed field, it was just a tilled field, then my memory of a child in those fields playing as my dad ran the tractor down the field, that's what I'm going to do, some of those little highlights off in the distance. This is that, again, I live in a flat area, so I have to find ways to make this flat area interesting, and this will be my distant tree lines. Now I'm also going to have just a little bit, as the sky goes up overhead, it becomes darker and more intense in color. So rather than have the sky go straight up, I'm going to try to bring that sky from the horizon, which will be lighter, over towards me. And that's getting into a little color theory. But again, we're just trying to work out the shapes and see my muscle memory when I get ready to paint this larger. If I decide to, then my muscle memory will be, okay, I remember how to put this together, and I don't have to struggle on a big piece. I will already have some of the basics worked out. Now I've got a little piece of red violet here. It was a little redder than what I was wanting to get in my darks, so I am putting that in here over this blue, and I'll get closer to the red violet that I envisioned for this piece. And those plow furrows going off into there, just big areas. I'm not going to put this in the sky because it will make that sky maybe just a little bit too dark. And I really am not looking for dark, I'm looking for more saturated color for the sky that would typically be more overhead as opposed to the distance. Now I'm using this particular color to brighten up, and I know I'm going to put some yellows in there, and that will gray down. I'll get this into this blue up over here, and that gives me that higher saturation that I'm looking for in the sky overhead. If you have watched my value paintings, everything up to this point, except for this yellow and this kind of peachy color, everything up to this point has been value 3. So if you were to take a picture prior to me putting this yellow on there, and I had covered that entire thing, even though you see contrast between these two, they would turn out the same shade of gray turned to a monotone. And this will be a little bit of that highlight, and this will be where that sun is coming off of some of those scoured pieces of soil that you see. And there were some out there, but they use a different tillage tool now, and it's not near as bright and interesting as a real plowed field would be. But I'm a lot about going with my feelings and my emotions, and when I did this, I was thinking about my youth. The dog and I would go follow through the furrows, and the birds would follow, and there would be birds picking up earthworms because in the spring the plow turns them over. All that sort of stuff is gone now, but I imagine there's still birds out there picking up worms. Now I have this back in here, that blue. Now this is kind of a earthy orange and yellow. It's really grayed down, meaning it's already got some violets in it. And see how I add that to that area back in there, and it goes back into the distance. But I keep a little of this dark because if you look off into the distance, even a hazy group of trees will have dark areas where the sun is not getting down into it as much. Now to me this is too bright for what I'm wanting to do, so I may bring some of this in and then get some more violets and blues over it. We'll stick in here some blues, and again I'm going at the angle the way those plowed furrows would be. But as you can see, it's already starting to have some shape. I'm already getting a feel. The importance of these minis, the whole purpose of showing you these minis is that just in a short time you can start to work out how you apply the paint, and that helps you if you go to a larger piece. This has a little more red in it, and I'm going to see if I can't join some of those things. And at this particular point I don't use a lot of wet pastel techniques on my minis. Sometimes I'll put a surface on there that would resemble what I'm going to do in a larger piece, but I don't usually squirt and run things down in the middle or even at the beginning of the process with minis. Again, the purpose of the minis is to work out a color palette, check to see if my drawing design is something that I want to use in a larger piece, and then also to work out how the color combinations and the angles, so I develop a muscle memory just like a musician. A musician knows exactly how to go from chord to chord, or the fingering on a stringed instrument or the piano. The muscle memory is there. They don't have to think about, oh, my index finger goes here, it goes this far away from the nut or whatever. You are developing muscle memory by doing these minis. I'm going to bring back some of these darks, and I'm not working on a lot of detail. I don't want to painstakingly put in detail. If you are into realism and you like representationalism, then think of these things as just little sketches. You don't have to show them to anyone. They are yours. They are yours to learn from and to experience. Although I like that last kind of grayed down violet, it darkened, or it lightened up some of these dark areas in the foreground that I want to use to bring the eye up into this piece and across it to the left and then back to the right on the horizon. So I'll put that blue back in, and then I'll put that original red-violet that I had that just wasn't quite the color I was looking for, and I think that will get me closer to, you see how I swirl up here and make this edge? I want that eye, the eye to go up through here and stop from going off the edges and then come back across, and I'll probably have something in the sky element that will complete the the semicircle that we're going for. And now I'm going to take my gloves off. I use these gloves only because pastels, and they're not toxic to us unless you breathe in the dust. But I'm going to take the gloves off just to do a little blending so I can get a feel for what that sky might be like, because I put that darker, more saturated red-violet up in the sky. And I think that's working. The sky goes back at the horizon and it comes not straight up, but it comes over me. And I'll probably do a little blending here. And I'm going to go towards the furrows. My fingers are picking this up. Like I said, I only wear the gloves because these pastels will dry out my fingers and they crack and bleed. That's the only reason I wear them. A lot of people can't wear gloves, and frankly, if I could get away without wearing them, I would also, but I just get too uncomfortable fingers, especially in the wintertime. It's not so bad in the summer. So I sacrifice my hand and my body for my artist friends by not using gloves. How's that? Just kidding. I'll have them on in a heartbeat. And I'll put some more of those little highlights, probably in the finished picture. They wouldn't be as big and wide. And I'll get me a little place up in here. This is close to the 1/3 and this is close to the 1/3, so I'll lighten up that horizon a little bit right in there and not get too carried away, and that light will then take us up and across to maybe just some areas in there. Okay, that's about all I'm going to do. Is that sellable? Probably not, but I'm not doing it to sell. I'm doing it to learn about the color combinations and setting those aside and remembering them if I decide in a couple days that, yeah, I like this mini. I'm going to do 2 or 3 other minis of different drawings and things, and I may put this and those up on the wall and just not do it and pick something else. So that's the minis. I normally would let that mini sit for 3 or 4 days on the wall, along, like I said, with others. But I decided, okay, I'm going to take that mini, and I'm going to, with the ideas in mind, do a 10 by 10 and see if I can use that mini and show you what, then how those ideas translate into something that's got just a little bit more detail. You can see the runs and drips, and I used a wet pastel technique using clear gesso over my roughed in colors that I selected and used on this that were used on the mini. So you can see I now have added texture, and you can see that wash and the blending that the gesso has done. I think I want to provide you guys with a live mini workshop doing minis. So I will do a live YouTube soon. And just keep watching the folks that are subscribers. You'll be able to join in and ask questions during the live event. I think that would be helpful to explore the use of these minis. Again, the minis are to grow, to learn, to develop muscle memory from, and to set aside with a small amount of materials rather than a huge painting that you decide you don't like the composition or don't like the color choices that you've made. So minis will help you cut some of that frustration that we talked about as far as the beginning painting process. I will take that to finish off camera, but I wanted to show you that next step, going from a mini to a larger piece. Now 10 by 10 isn't very large. I may like this so well because of that memory as a child, following Dad's plow and with the dog and the birds and the worms, and I may just paint this into something that's a 20 by 20 or 24 by 24. So you never know where these minis are going to take you, and that's the point. So hopefully you got something out of this. If you do, please hit subscribe, and I'll have something good for you next week. But also think about, if you're at all interested, put in the comments that, yeah, I would join a live workshop watching me paint a mini and talking about the process. So until next time, take care everybody. Bye-bye. I've got a great tutorial video